Hi, welcome. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a visitor's guide for newcomers who are perhaps traveling to the Napa Valley for the first time, or for people who visited before that would just like a few more tips on making their next stay in the valley amazing, or perhaps adding a little bit of variety to what is usually a pretty regimented stay. People like what they like, and hopefully in this episode, it'll help you kind of venture out and try something new. So, in this episode, we're going to be highlighting 10 visitor tips from a local. And from there, every episode, we're going to be offering something new. But in this one, it's going to be part one of a visitor's guide to the Napa Valley. All right, first off, tip number one, shit's expensive here. Get over it. There's really nothing that you can change in terms of the price of the valley. Things are going to get more expensive. The one thing I hate hearing from visitors is, oh, 20 years ago, things used to be a lot cheaper. And it's like, well, yeah, like look at stuff that costs, 30 bucks 20 years ago. It's probably not $30 now, right? What over the course of your life stays the same price? Very few things. The valley is very expensive. And if you're coming to the valley with a budget, that's awesome. There is tons of things to do on a tighter budget. However, if you're going to go tasting, don't make it somebody else's fault that maybe the wines might be a little bit out of your price range. I would probably suggest looking at wineries ahead of time, looking at the bottle price, the cost of the tasting, and email ahead and see if maybe you buy 3 bottles, you have your tasting waived if you join the club, and you take your first shipment if they waive the tastings. But the one thing that you are not gonna get out of is paying for shit, because everything here is very expensive. And I'll add to that, I don't take my girl out to Nobu every day because I don't have Nobu money, right? I'm not telling my girl, oh baby, this is gonna be an everyday thing. If you're a guy and you're planning something really special, like maybe an anniversary, great, but it's expensive. All right, here's the next tip. Tastings cost money, right? Your grandparents, your fucking great grandparents, when they would come to the valley, they would come and drink for free, right? There were 10 wineries that they would hit because they would go up to the bar when they'd be one of 50, right? And they'd, point their glass over the bar, and some guy would just fill it up with whatever, and you buy a couple bottles, and then you'd bugger off to the next winery. That worked for the boomers. However, in the modern era, tastings are expensive. The last free tasting in the Napa Valley was Heights Cellars back in 2017, 2018, when it was acquired by the Lawrence Group, which is a private group that started charging $30 for tastings. And now their tasting at Heights is about $75. So one of the things that you'll note is you can't get out of paying tasting fees. You're going to pay them. They're everywhere, unfortunately. Wineries also aren't allowed to pour you free wine like it's alcohol, right? A lot of wineries are operating under a bar license, and like any bar, you can't get a free drink. Oh, hey, let me get a free beer. Like that doesn't work. And going up to a winery and walking into a winery expecting free stuff just because the other winery did it isn't great. Don't expect that. Tastings are everywhere. You're going to have to pay for them. Now, to add to that, if the commitment of paying a tasting fee really bugs you, go to a place that offers wines by the glass. There are tons of wineries now that are offering just wines by the glass, where you come in, you pick your wine, they give you a glass of wine, you head outside, and it's no tasting, no experience. It's just you and whoever you're with. That way you can get in and get an idea of what the wines taste like without the commitment of a tasting, because tastings now are more experience driven, because that's what people are seeking out, is the experience. Whereas for the larger wineries, the experience really sells it as opposed to the wine. Whereas if you go to one of the smaller houses, usually it's the opposite, where the wine itself will be driving you there as opposed to the experience. So check it out. Some of the larger houses, some of the more high volume places offer wine by the glass, and I would encourage you guys, if you don't want to pay tasting fees, call up ahead of time. Hey, can we buy a glass of wine? Yes or no. Whatever the answer is, you know whether or not they offer wine by the glass, and it's a great way to get you in the door without the commitment of a tasting fee. Now, the upside, as I said earlier, most wineries, if you join the club, will waive the tasting fees. That's the incentive. You love the wines, you love what the winery stands for, you love the wine making, right? You like the ambiance, whatever it is. If you want to be a part of that community, most wineries are going to waive those fees for you. Some of them don't. That's totally okay. Call ahead. right? Um, oh, it doesn't hurt to ask. Now, to add to that, if you're paying $45 for a tasting, which it's expensive, right? That's a lot of money. Don't be surprised if your host has multiple tables, especially if they're on the valley floor, because most of the wineries on the valley floor that are charging 45, 50, $60 for a tasting are not private. If you want a private experience, go to a place up on the mountains, whether it's the Mayacamas Mountain, whether it is the Vaca Mountain. Seek out a smaller place that charges similar tastings, but ensure that the experience is private. That's one of the things that bothered me working at Farniente was guests would pay $45 for a tasting at Bella Union and expect me to be with them, and I'm like, no, I've got 5 or 6 other groups, and that's not realistic. So set your expectation. If you're paying 45, 50, $60 for a tasting, it's probably not going to be private. Always call ahead and ask if it is fully private or if your guests will have other tables. This is the next bit that is going to be the most important and probably should have started with it. When you're coming to the valley and you're planning your trip, for most people, 80% of your budget actually goes to your hotel. If you look at hotel prices in the valley during the summer, they are so overinflated and they are extremely expensive. One of the reasons people aren't visiting the valley is because hotel rooms are where all of the money goes, right? You're probably going to stay here for a week, right? You're going to hit up 15 wineries, maybe 2 3 a day on average, and you're going to love a lot of them, and you're going to have to be very selective about which places you do and don't join the club at, where you can spend your money, because the hotel is going to eat 80% of it. And unfortunately, those room rates are not going to go down. So my recommendation is to stay in Fairfield, which is about 45 minutes east of Napa. It's a very easy drive, but the room rates are literally 80% less than what you would pay here in the valley. Or my recommendation as well, stay in Sonoma for $200 a night, as opposed to the valley during the summer where it could easily creep up to $700 or $800 a night at the Best Western, which is not it's not super luxurious, but anywhere else in the world, $800 is going to get you a phenomenal room. Whereas here in the valley during the summer, you're going to get a piece of crap. Sorry, Best Western. Up next, what defines the quality of a wine? Is it the price or is it the exclusivity? Or is it just the fact that it's easy drinking? For a lot of people, there's a very common misconception that the price of a wine dictates the quality, meaning that if you're paying $800 for a bottle of wine, it's just as good as one that's 900, so on and so forth. The more expensive, the better quality. That's simply not the case, right? The unfortunate thing is most of the wineries in the valley, you can get most of the wines outside of the valley, right? The winery exclusives are there as a bonus, and a lot of the clients will seek that out. However, 99% of the time, the wine that you can get back home is still going to be the most popular because it's the one that set the style for the house. It's the one that is most recognized, and that's a really tough hole to get out of because you'll go to a winery and they'll have 15 winery exclusives and they might not be great, right? So, and they might also be more expensive than the flagship that you can get back home or the one that you can get at Total Wines or Costco, Bevmo, whatever it is, Benny's, HEB for my Texans. The price of a bottle and the exclusivity of it is not at all an indicator of the quality. The most important thing is how it makes you feel when you buy it and you pop it open and you give yourself a glass, right? That's always the most important. It is never the price. And to add to that, you visiting for the first time or maybe revisiting, if you're going to a place where you have had the wine before, you know it's everywhere, you know it's consistent, you might go to the tasting room and try 8 different wines you can't get outside of the tasting room and be like, the one I like best is the one I can get at home, right? Because it's consistent and you're probably not familiar with the winery exclusive. So I would be very careful in telling you what wines are better than others. There are certainly wines that make me feel better than others. However, don't go into a tasting room, especially an expensive tasting where it's 200 plus per person, and think, oh, these wines are going to be better than a tasting that's $85 and they're pouring me $100 or bottles of wine. That's not the case. Next up, tourist traps. Don't be surprised that a tourist trap is just that, right? And I'm not going to name them here, there are places out there where you go because you type in best wineries in the valley and TripAdvisor highlights it, Wine and Leisure or the San Francisco Chronicle, and you're like, oh, really? This place is the best winery in the valley, or this is the best boutique winery in the valley? Are you serious? And you go there and you're like, wow, these wines are not great, right? Don't be surprised when you go to a place where you're shoulder to shoulder with 300 people and the wines aren't great, right? Think about what you want and where you want to be when you are tasting, because being crowded and being one of 300 isn't great. It's fine if you just like want to hang out and like be kind of invisible and have your snack at the table. But if you would like a little bit more attention, again, taking this all back to the very beginning, seek out a winery that might be private or semi private, or fully private for the experience. But that's the one thing, is if it's on all of the big magazines, there's a pretty good chance it's a tourist trap, and it's going to probably disappoint when you get there. Now, to give you all an idea on which wineries are tourist traps, well, here's some food for thought. If you can buy the wine on a Costco shelf, or if it's at Total Wines and it's cheaper at Total Wines than it is to get it at the winery, it's probably a tourist trap, right? Or here's the thing: if you're shoulder to shoulder with 1,000 people and people are just taking photos and nobody's drinking the wine, right? Those places, you'll find them all on the valley floor. My recommendation, if you would prefer to go tasting as opposed to just taking photos for the Instagram, seek out some of the smaller places. Okay guys, so this time we're going to be leaning into what it's like actually working in the winery on the server side. And this tip is for people who are just overall going to complain about stuff. If you're coming in with negative energy, please don't. Now, I will give you a pass. I'm very introverted, despite the fact that I'm putting myself out there. I'm a very introverted person, and I get it. I've hosted couples who are very sweet and very introverted. I respect it. I don't really like being loud. I don't really like drawing attention to myself when I'm hosting people. I'm, there to assist, but I'm not there to be like the star of the show. And I get it. If you're reserved, totally cool, right? I can pick out the energy, and I'm not going to be a dick. But if you're just coming in and you're a negative Nancy, and right off the bat, you're saying you want to try the most expensive stuff, no, I'm not going to fucking pour it for you. Why would I pour it for you if everything else wasn't good enough? You're not going to, you're not going to buy the wine, and you're going to try it just to try it, to say you did. So please, 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 respectfully leave the negative energy in the parking lot, leave it in the hotel room, just anywhere but the tasting room. No one wants to host people who are just in a bad mood. The next one is very important: tipping culture. How do you know what to tip in the valley? Do you tip? Do you ask for their Venmo? How do you manage that as a guest? Well, firstly, tips are never expected. You should always tip someone, especially in the valley, based on the service they give you. I've been hosted by plenty of people in the valley who have completely ruined wineries for me that I would never go back to, or I perhaps might have liked the wine, really liked what they stood for, but I've been back a couple of times and the same person just kind of ruins it for me. I get it, right? Maybe you just want to be nice, you hated the experience, and you're like, oh, let's leave them something. I don't give a shit, right? I don't ask for tips. I'm not with my hand out like, oh, please leave me a gratuity. It doesn't matter, right? Always tip based on the service you're given and the quality of the service you're given. Don't ever feel obliged. I know that, especially in the US, everywhere, you go to pay for something and a tip screen pops up and you're like, why am I tipping for buying milk? Like, there's a market here in Napa that you go to buy like an energy drink and there's like a tip screen. I'm like, what? I went to grab it in the fridge. Why am I tipping? So when you're at a tasting room, especially if it's a high volume winery, those people are probably very well paid. If you weren't happy with the experience, don't tip. Doesn't matter. It goes the exact same for the boutique places where the hosts sit down with you and they chat with you for 3 hours. If you didn't like the experience, don't tip. Buy a bottle, but don't tip. It doesn't matter. It's entirely up to you. The one thing I don't want people visiting is feeling obligated to leave gratuities for people. Feel empowered. You're paying for the experience. You're paying to be here in the valley, and you're paying a lot of money. If service isn't up to your standard, don't tip. Totally okay. The people who take this very seriously, they don't care. They understand, right? I've told people straight up, I haven't been comfortable with the service I've given you. I haven't given you the attention. Please don't leave me a gratuity. And this is with people trying to hand me money. I'm like, no, dude, like, I'm so sorry. Like, this is not indicative of the service I want to give you. I feel really ashamed. Like, this is not the level that I personally strive for. And I've had no problem telling people, like, you're good. Like, don't tip me, right? I'm cool. Like, I don't want it. Not everyone in the valley would operate like that. And like I said, the higher volume wineries, Um, they're usually well taken care of. The smaller places, they're usually well taken care of. So always ask. And if you want a tip, great. But if not, who cares? And the reason this is so important is there are wineries out there and servers out there, like wine educators, estate hosts, so to speak, who expect 20% on everything. And that's quite unrealistic. If you're spending 2 grand at a winery, right, on wine, and the host is expecting 20%, 20% for what? It's $400 that you give them for what? For making you laugh and pouring you wine. Like if you think they're worth it, great, but don't ever like the whole 20% thing is for restaurants, and even then I've tipped 20% at places where I'm like I would never go back. There are people out there that host people in the valley, and when they know that you're not going to tip them, or you know that they will not buy wine, they will treat you differently. Now, adding to that is in the server world, in the hospitality sector, there are a lot of people who have this classic mentality of, well, if you can't afford to go out, like, and you can't tip, don't go out. Well, that's not always the case. If I have money to spend on wine, that's the product that I'm buying. I'm not buying you, right? There are servers out there who will treat you as such and um, will then tell their manager, hey, when those club members come back or when those people come back, I'm not taking them because they didn't buy anything and they didn't tip me, and they'll take it personally, right? Um, and so for a lot of people, it's a very transactional experience, and tipping is something in the valley um, that is always a generosity. It's never something that is an expectation, and especially as a guest who is visiting us from God knows where in the country or even the world, um, it's a misconception to leave a gratuity when you've been made to feel bad, right? Because you don't want to be rude. Um, always tip on the service you're given. This one's for the locals, okay? If you're taking advantage of the Napa Neighbor perk, buy a bottle. Like it's already most wineries for the Napa Neighbor month, or if it's on the Napa Neighbor website, most places will waive at least 2 tastings for you. And if you're the type of person to use that platform to come in, try the wines, not buy a bottle, and not leave anything for your host when you're 99% of the time being given great service, yeah, you're gonna be singled out next time you come in, and no one's gonna want to take you. Now, this is just for the locals or those that are living in California. Um, I've had the pleasure of hosting a lot of people who have taken advantage of the Napa Neighbors perk, and they're sweet. I never expect a gratuity from them. I never expect them to buy wine, but there was a pretty bad period of time last year at the winery I was at where 90% of our visitation was Napa neighbors and they came to drink for free. If that's you and you're coming and you're taking advantage of the Napa neighbor program, don't come to drink for free. It's kind of trashy, right? And we're going to leave notes in your account. Up next is going to be splitting tastings. A lot of the time, larger groups or maybe even couples will say, hey, look, I want to do the tasting. I'll probably smell it. I don't really want to drink because I'm driving. Is it okay if we split tastings? Absolutely. The hell do I care, right? You're here. I'm going to say yes to most of the things you say and most of the things you ask. Most of the good wine educators in the valley will say absolutely. A lot of the higher volume wineries have gotten into this really ugly trend of charging a seat fee or charging you $20 for a little snack, a little nibble, and then some water because you're not drinking. I think that's pretty egregious. I think that leaves a really bad taste in the guests' mouths. However, if you're coming to the valley and you want to split a tasting, that's totally okay. However, you should not be the people who come in and want your own glasses. If I'm hosting you and you're splitting a tasting and there's 2 of you, you get 1 set of glasses, you each get a water glass, and I'm pouring the 1 ounce pour in every single glass. When I worked at the higher volume winery I was at 2 years ago, I would get it a lot where people would be like, can we just get a little more? And it puts you in this really uncomfortable situation of having to tell people, I can't overserve you, right? Legally, I'm obligated to make sure that you get to your next place responsibly. Oh, well, we paid at so and so for the tasting. Well, yeah, but you're getting what you pay for, right? And so don't be the people that want your own glasses if you're splitting a tasting. You're getting 1 set in the middle, right? If it's 2 of you, and if it's 4 of you, you get 2 sets of glasses and you can split them. If you guys are germaphobes, don't split a tasting. Otherwise, it's totally okay. We totally understand. There's no judgment on our end. However, most of the wineries will probably charge you some sort of fee for not drinking. Now, here's a quick story time. I used to work at a winery that was very high volume about 3 years ago, and the reason I'm bringing this story up is this is precisely linked to splitting and tasting. I had a group of four, very lovely Midwesterners, very sweet people, but it was four of them, and they each wanted to split two tastings. So I said, okay, no problem. And they said, but we each want our own wine glasses. And I said, okay, not a problem. So what I did was, instead of giving them each a 1 ounce pour, because that would have been four full tastings, I gave two people a half ounce and the other two people a half ounce, which was enough for two sips, which is splitting a tasting. And they're like, oh, that's all we get for two tastings? And I said, yes, because I'm dividing what would be one tasting from one glass into two. So it looks like it's considerably less. Oh, well, can't you just pour us some more? Because this doesn't seem like a lot. I'm like, guys, I work here. I'm telling you, I already, just to be nice, poured you guys a little bit extra. But that is one tasting being split into two glasses. And the reason this is so important is there's this common misconception that if you try to be cute and you try to be quirky and split, two tastings four ways and each get your own glasses, you're not going to get extra wine. You're getting the wine just split evenly into four. So don't come in with this, oh, ha, 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 we're going to get them. We're going to get a one up on them. You might get an extra splash of wine, but you're not each getting a full tasting if you're splitting. Sorry. Here's one that not too many people think about, especially on the guest side, but on the hospitality side, we hear quite often, which is, oh, I'm just going to buy the wine online. I had a great time. Thank you for a really wonderful experience. I have an account online. I'm just going to buy it there. Don't tell me that. That messes with my sales goal, right? No one on this side wants to hear, oh, I came in, I paid for a tasting, but I'm not going to buy anything, right? I mean, because then I spend an hour and a half building a relationship with you, and we're laughing, we're sharing jokes, we're sharing stories, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm just not going to buy wine. That's totally fine. However, most hosts, most wine educators, most sommeliers need to meet their sales goal. And it's really disheartening to build a relationship with someone, and then they kind of say, oh, we're not going to buy anything today. Buy it with your host, right? If you liked it at the winery and you're going to buy it online, it's going to taste the same. Buy it with your host, stagger the shipping out until you get back. But just understand that a winery is a business, and most of the hosts need to meet their sales goals. And I personally dislike this tip because it makes the whole thing transactional, but I'm going to be very transparent with you guys. That's what goes on behind the scenes, and that's something you guys should be cognizant of. Every time I've had someone tell me they're going to buy wine online, I do my due diligence. I go check a week later, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, a year later, nothing. And that's totally okay. I'm not forcing you to buy the wine, but don't lie to me. Just say, I'm not going to buy anything today. I just came here to have fun, right? That's easier to say that than, oh, I'll just buy it off the website, because I can easily verify that and I can easily check. It's just weird. Just don't do that, right? Your host has a sales goal. Buy at least a bottle or two. Ship it. Who the hell cares, right? But don't tell us that you're going to buy it online, because that's the one thing that everybody on this side hates hearing. Here's a little bit more context on this entire topic. If you buy something online, your host doesn't get credit for it. Maybe they get a commission, but maybe that wine sale just goes to their sales goal either for the month or for the quarter. It reflects negatively on each host if you host a table and they don't buy wine at the winery, right? Or perhaps if you buy wine later, it still reflects negatively because the e-commerce team isn't going to then pull, oh, did so-and-so come in for a tasting? They don't do that. E-com is going to take the credit for it, and it's going to look like that channel is a lot more successful than it actually is. Not every wine educator is going to check the orders to then say, oh, hey, I hosted so-and-so, and here's their order from the website. Do I get credit for it? I've done it plenty of times at the previous winery I was at, and every time I was told no, e-commerce takes credit for it because that's their channel. I'm like, but I hosted them. I did all the work. So just so you guys are aware, these types of things happen behind the scenes. It's a very uncomfortable topic to even discuss. However, it is something that is a reality for a lot of your hosts, for a lot of the wine educators, sommeliers in the Valley. Don't tell us you're going to buy it on the website. It just reflects negatively on us, unfortunately. Now, if you do have a great relationship with your host, your sommelier, whoever, if you've built up a relationship over that hour and a half with them, and you will buy wine, take down their contact info, right? Hey, here's my first, last name, phone number. When you are going to place your order, call me, right? I'll take down the order. I'll put it in when I get back to work. That way, it doesn't look, negatively or in, show negative sales, so to speak. But that's only if you have a working relationship or like a very friendly relationship with your host. Otherwise, just tell me you're not going to buy wine. I mean, I personally don't care. I'm not going to treat you differently if you tell me you're not going to buy wine. Everyone gets treated the same. At least if I'm hosting them, just tell me up front. I mean, I don't care, right? To me, it doesn't make a difference, but to everybody else in the valley and a lot of the wineries who are very sales driven and sales forward and sales pitchy, it makes a huge difference. For me, I'm chilling. I don't give a shit, right? Whether you buy it online, whether you buy it at the website on the website, whether you're a club member, doesn't make a difference to me. It all goes to the same account. Now, this is one, again, circling back to mostly Napa neighbors, but also guest passes. If you're coming in for a free tasting and you're not happy with what you're given, or you're asking for extra stuff just because you might be a friend of a club member or you're a Napa neighbor and you've been in Napa for 8 generations, don't ask for extra stuff like that. It's you're already getting a free tasting. What are you doing? I'm gonna look negatively at a request where I come in, I pour the 4 wines for you, I bring you a bonus splash, and then you're like, oh, actually, can I get this and then this and then this? And by the way, I'm gonna, and it's a very weird position to be in. And if you're gonna be ungrateful for the wine, for the time that I'm spending with you, don't come in, right? If you want to drink for free, cool. Come in and just say that. Hey, we just want to drink. We're not gonna buy any wine. We're friends of a club member and they set this up for us and we're kind of just passing through. Great. But I've heard quite often, and this was common when I worked at a winery that had plenty of club members, the guest passes would be utilized frequently on behalf of those club members, and their friends would come in expecting everything. And it's challenging in the tasting room to adjust the expectation of, I'm a guest, I'm going to get everything I want, and the hospitality side where I have to be responsible and I can't give away the house. And if you're someone who's going to ask for the house and not pay for it, you're probably not going to value it. And so don't come in at a free tasting and expect everything, demand everything, because if I'm hosting you and I know you're not paying for it, you're going to get the wines, you're going to get a bonus wine, maybe you'll get a bonus wine, who the hell knows, but I'm not going to bring out the red carpet, right, or the candelabras for someone who hasn't valued the tasting thus far. Sorry. Okay, guys, that wraps it up for the visitor's guide for the first episode. I'm very opinionated. These videos are going to be structured in that way because there's quite a big disconnect between people who have worked hospitality and people who have not worked hospitality, and I'm trying to bridge those two together, right? So if you're coming in from wherever and you've never worked a front of the house job, if you've never worked in a kitchen, if you've never been a server, if you've never worked somewhere that's guest facing, this series is really meant to adjust those expectations and just be realistic and pretty honest with you guys, because the Valley is such a wonderful place and there's tons of cool things to do here. However, those expectations are going to have to be adjusted slightly, especially for things like free tastings, what wineries to visit, the bottle prices, right? Bottles are really expensive in the Valley. How many wineries to hit, splitting tastings, wine club joins, wave state, like everything in the Valley, is amazing, right? However, this is really meant to be educational. I'm meant to guide you guys through a lot of these tough questions and topics, frankly. And I can't wait to do it again. I don't know when the next video is going to come out. I'm working on it, but this is going to be a series that we continue. I'm happy to welcome new topics. I'm going to be doing wine tasting reviews. I'm going to be doing reviews of wines by the glass. I'll go out, drink a glass of wine, talk about it. Restaurant reviews, the whole 9 yards. But again, I'm not going to do it from the hospitality side of it where I'm getting everything for free. I'm going to go out, pay for my tastings, and I'm not going to advertise this channel or anything like that. So it's just going to be me building it organically. The last thing I want is to start getting everything for free and then pretending as if I'm paying for it, right? There are a lot of YouTube channels out there who do that, unfortunately. I take a lot of pride in what I do, and I take this very seriously. And it's just information that I want to share. It's great info, and it's It's a lot of stuff in this video that hasn't really been talked about yet from any YouTube channel from the hospitality side. So I'm very happy to be bringing these visitor guide videos out more often. And yeah, stay safe.